If you have tinnitus, someone has probably handed you a list of things that you're not supposed to do. Don't drink coffee, don't listen to music, don't stress out. That's not what this video is. I want to give you 3 things you can actually do, things that have real evidence behind them that I've seen work with real patients and that make a meaningful difference in how your tinnitus feels day to day. I'm Dr. Lane Garrett, founder of Timpanogos Hearing and Tinnitus in Utah. I hold the certificate holder in tinnitus management from the American Board of Audiology. And after 20 years of working with tinnitus patients, these are the 3 things I keep coming back to time and again. Most people with tinnitus are making it worse at night without even realizing it. And the fix has nothing to do with medication. The first tip is one of the most powerful things you can do, and most people are either not doing it right or even don't know about it, and that is managing your sound environment. Most people with tinnitus have one of 2 instincts. They either avoid all sound because everything feels overwhelming, or they crank up the TV trying to drown out the ringing. Neither is actually helping you. Silence is the enemy of tinnitus. When there's no external sound, your brain has nothing to compete with. The ringing becomes the loudest thing in the room. I've had patients tell me that their tinnitus is unbearable at 3 a.m. in a quiet bedroom, but barely noticeable on a busy afternoon at work. That's not a coincidence. That's your auditory system responding to the sound environment around it. What you want instead is something called sound enrichment. Low-level, pleasant background noise that gives your brain something else to process besides the tinnitus. But we don't want it loud enough to compete, just enough to fill the silence. A fan, a white noise machine, nature sounds through a speaker, soft music. The goal isn't to cover up the tinnitus, it's to make the silence less noticeable, which reduces how prominent the tinnitus sounds. Think of it like the refrigerator hum in your kitchen. You probably can't hear it right now because there's enough ambient sound around you, but go stand in your kitchen at midnight in a quiet house and suddenly you'll hear it. Tinnitus works the same way. You're not trying to eliminate the signal, you're reducing the contrast in the environment that makes the signal sound out. At night, this matters even more. A 2024 study in the journal Medicine using NHANES data found that disrupted sleep significantly increased tinnitus severity, with poor sleep patterns showing the strongest association. What I tell patients is, don't try to fall asleep in silence. Put on something low and consistent in the background, not stimulating like TV, but just a sound that's present. Your brain relaxes when there is ambient sound. If this is already changing how you think about your tinnitus, this is exactly what I do on this channel. Real patients, real evidence, no fluff. Hit the like button and subscribe if you want more of it. The next one does not show up on most tinnitus lists. In my experience, it's often the real reason that people stay stuck in their tinnitus for years. Tip 2 addresses the anxiety loop, and it's often the real reason tinnitus goes from manageable to unbearable. See, here's what happens. You notice a tinnitus. Your nervous system flags it as a threat. That triggers stress hormones, which heightens your attention to the tinnitus, which makes it seem louder, which triggers more anxiety. It's a loop that once it gets going, it can feel impossible to break. This isn't a weakness, it's neurobiology. Research confirms a bidirectional relationship between tinnitus and anxiety and sleep disturbance, each one feeding the other in a self-reinforcing cycle. The tinnitus doesn't have to get louder for it to feel worse. The anxiety amplifies the perception of the tinnitus. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, is the most evidence-based approach for interrupting that loop. And I want to be clear about what CBT really does because there's a lot of confusion. CBT does not make the tinnitus quieter. What it does is change how your brain responds to it. It changes the tinnitus out of the threat category in your nervous system, and over time, your brain stops reacting to it as an alarm, and that loop that we were talking about just a second ago, it gets broken up and stops running. A randomized controlled trial of smartphone-based CBT for chronic tinnitus found statistically significant reductions in tinnitus burden after both 3 and 9 months of treatment, with improvements continuing to grow over the full treatment period. That's important. Remember, all tinnitus treatment is not a quick fix, but the benefits compound. You don't need formal CBT therapy to start applying these principles. The core skill is this. When you catch yourself monitoring your tinnitus, checking how loud it is, evaluating whether it's better today or worse today, redirect your attention deliberately. not by suppressing the thought, but genuinely engaging with something else. A task that's going to require some focus, a conversation, a project. Your brain can only sustain so much attention at one time, and what you pay attention to becomes your experience. In our clinic, we walk patients through structured CBT education. We talk about the neurophysiology of why tinnitus feels the way it does and specific techniques for interrupting that attention anxiety loop. Understanding what's happening in your nervous system often reduces the fear, and reducing the fear of the tinnitus is honestly more than half the battle. Sound environment and the anxiety loop will get you far, but for most people, there's still a missing piece. This last one is the most commonly missed, and if you skip it, the other two won't get you there. Tip 3 is untreated hearing loss, and it's the one that most people skip, and it's the reason tips 1 and 2 often don't work as well as they should. See, more than 90% of people with bothersome tinnitus have underlying hearing loss, often hearing loss that they don't even recognize they have yet. And here's why that matters. When your auditory system is not getting the sound input it needs, your brain compensates by turning up its own internal volume. That hyperactivity is what generates the tinnitus. So when people chase treatment by changing supplement after supplement or gadget after gadget, while the actual driver of the tinnitus sits unaddressed, they're managing symptoms with one hand tied behind their back. I had a patient a few years back that was a retired teacher. She'd had tinnitus that was driving her crazy for almost 3 years, and she'd tried every supplement she could find, 2 different sound therapy apps, she even tried acupuncture, and nothing had moved the needle. When she came to see us, the first thing we did was a comprehensive hearing test. Sure enough, moderate high frequency hearing loss that she really didn't know about. We fit her with properly verified hearing aids, and within 6 weeks, she told me it was the first time in 3 years that she'd gone to bed without the ringing dominating everything. The sound was still there, but it had stepped back a bit. Her brain finally had what it was missing. That pattern, trying everything except addressing the actual driver of the tinnitus, is the most common thing I see with patients. A comprehensive audiological evaluation isn't a quick screen that you find at the pharmacy kiosk. It's testing that actually characterizes your hearing loss and connects it to what's happening with your tinnitus. The critical word there is properly programmed. This is where I see a lot of people get shortchanged. Only about 30% of audiology clinics perform real ear measurements, and that verification step confirms that the hearing aids are actually calibrated to your specific hearing and your specific ear canal. Without that, hearing aids can be under or overpowered, which does nothing for the tinnitus and can make it worse. If you're going to use hearing aids, make sure the clinic is doing it right. And if your hearing's normal, that does not necessarily mean your auditory system is off the hook. A standard audiological hearing test only goes up to around 8,000 hertz, but the human hearing range goes all the way to 20,000 hertz. Damage in those higher frequencies won't show up on a regular hearing test, but it can absolutely drive your tinnitus. That's why extended high frequency audiometry matters. Find a clinic that does it. We also use otoacoustic emissions to detect cochlear damage well before it shows up in a regular hearing test. I've had patients come in with normal hearing tests from other clinics and had cochlear damage showing up on that otoacoustic emission. The standard basic hearing test completely missed that. So normal hearing doesn't mean nothing. It means you need to look further for the problem. And if the auditory system genuinely checks out, a good tinnitus clinic won't stop there. They'll look at jaw tension and see if there's TMJ dysfunction, because those are surprisingly common tinnitus drivers that most people don't ever get evaluated for. We also need to look at medication side effects. There are over 200 drugs with tinnitus listed as a side effect. Cardiovascular factors, blood pressure, neck muscle involvement. The point is, tinnitus is rarely one thing, and a thorough evaluation accounts for all of those things. If the clinic you're working with ran a standard hearing test and handed you a pamphlet and called it done, said we can't help you, that's not a tinnitus evaluation. That's only the starting point. So, manage your sound environment, break the anxiety loop, and address the actual root cause of the tinnitus. These 3 things together get you much further than any one of them will alone. And none of this requires a special device or prescription to start. What it does require is working consistently with someone who understands the full picture of what tinnitus is. Not just the tinnitus sound, but the nervous system's response that's driving it. If you've been doing these things and still struggling, that's a signal the underlying cause hasn't been properly identified. When you're looking for a tinnitus specialist, start with someone with the CHTM credential from the American Board of Audiology. That tells you that person has advanced, dedicated training in tinnitus assessment and treatment, not just general audiology. But the credentials are only part of it. Psychoacoustic tinnitus testing, pitch matching, loudness matching, minimum masking levels should be part of the evaluation. So the clinician is actually characterizing your tinnitus rather than just asking you about it. Bimodal neuromodulation like linear should also be available for cases where sound enrichment alone is not enough. Objective outcome tracking, including heart rate variability monitoring, matters a lot because measuring whether treatment is working is different than guessing. And cognitive behavioral therapy education must be woven into the plan from the start, not a last resort. If the clinic hands you hearing aids and sends you home, that's not comprehensive tinnitus care. You deserve more than that. I'm curious, which of these three things is the hardest one for you right now? Drop it in the comments. If you want to go deeper on any of these, sound therapy protocols, cognitive behavioral therapy education, or what a proper tinnitus evaluation with a professional should look like, I've put together a free learning center with detailed guides. Link can be found in the description. And if you're here in northern Utah and you've been struggling without a clear answer, that's exactly what a comprehensive tinnitus evaluation is for. Not a quick hearing screening, a full workup that includes that psychoacoustic testing, extended high-frequency audiometry, otoacoustic emission testing, and a real conversation about what's causing your tinnitus and what you can do about it. We do all of that in our clinics along the Wasatch Front. A link to make an appointment can be found in the description. Thanks for watching.